This tutorial is for 4th grade, Module 1, Lesson 7. In Lesson 7, we're going to use the vertical number line to help us round numbers. The directions say to round to the nearest thousand, and we'll use the number line to model our thinking. I have the number 6,700, and I need to round it to the nearest thousand. To place the numbers on the number line, I'm going to look at the original number of thousands I have in my number. Since I have 6,000 in the original number, it would not round to anything less than 6,000. That's going to be my lowest number on my number line. From there, I'm going to go up to the next 1,000. So after 6,000, I would have 7,000. That means my answer choices will be either 6,000 or 7,000. The next step is to place the midpoint between 6,000 and 7,000, or the halfway point. Halfway between those two numbers would be 6,500. So I have my two answer choices and I have my midpoint. The next step is to plot our original number on the number line. The 6,700 would come above 6,500. So 6,700 would fall roughly about there, and it's between 6,500 and 7,000. Because my number is above the midpoint, we would round this number up to the next 1,000. So 6,700 rounded to the nearest 1,000 is 7,000 because it's past the halfway point. Let's look at the next problem. Here I have 9,340. Again, since I'm starting with 9,000, when I round my number, it would not be anything less than 9,000. So that's my starting point. If I go up to the next 1,000, one more 1,000 after 9,000 would be 10,000. The midpoint between 9,000 and 10,000 is 9,500. And now let's plot our number. 9,340 would be less than the midpoint. So we'll put that on the number line. And since it is less than the midpoint, this number would round it down to 9,000. So 9,340 rounded to the nearest 1,000 is 9,000. I have a couple more problems, and we're still rounding these numbers to the nearest 1,000. My first number is 16,401. Since I have 16,000, that would be my lowest number. It would not round to anything less than 16,000. If I add another 1,000 onto that, I would have 17,000. That's my other answer choice. The midpoint between 16,000 and 17,000 would be 16,500. Now let's plot our number on the number line. 16,401 would fall under 16,500. We'll put that on the line. And since it falls under or below the midpoint, this number would round down to 16,000. 16,401 rounded to the nearest 1,000 is 16,000. Next I have 39,545. That means my smallest answer choice would be 39,000. If I go up one more 1,000 from 39,000, that gives me 40,000. The midpoint between 39,000 and 40,000 is 39,500. Now let's plot our number. 39,545 would be just a little bit past the midpoint, 39,545. Since my number is past the midpoint, it would round up, and the answer would be 40,000. 39,545 would round to 40,000 when we round it to the nearest 1,000. Here I have a couple more problems, and again we're still rounding these to the nearest 1,000. My first number is 399,499. Since I have 399,000, that would be my lowest answer choice. And if I'm at 399,000 and I add one more 1,000 to it, That would take me to 400,000. So there are my two answer choices. The midpoint then would be 399,500. And now we'll plot the original number, 399,499, would fall just below the midpoint. And since this number falls below the midpoint, it will round down to the answer of 399,000. And over here I have 840,007. Since I'm starting with 840,000, that will be my smallest answer choice. And if I go up 1,000 from there, that would give me 841,000. The midpoint between these two numbers would be 840,500. And we'll plot our number on the number line. 840,007 is just above 840,000. That means it will round down to 840,000 because it's below the midpoint. And finally, we have a word problem, and we're going to use the vertical number line to help us solve it. The question says, a pilot wanted to know about how many kilometers he flew on his last 3 flights. From New York City to London, he flew 5,572 kilometers. Then from London to Beijing, he flew 8,147 kilometers. And finally, he flew 10,996 kilometers from Beijing back to New York City. We're going to round each number to the nearest thousand, then find the sum of the rounded numbers to estimate how many kilometers the pilot flew. I'm going to start by writing my answer statement so I can remember the goal of this problem. So we want to know how many kilometers the pilot flew, about how many kilometers. So we'll say the pilot flew about blank kilometers. Now let's take each number and round it to the nearest thousand. I'm going to start with 5,572. If we're rounding to the nearest thousand, I'll look and see how many thousands I have to start with, and that would be 5,000. That would be my lower answer choice. If I go up 1,000 from there, that would be 6,000. The midpoint would be 5,500. And now we'll plot 5,572. Well, that's going to be just above the midpoint. Since it's above the midpoint, it would round up to 6,000. Next, let's round 8,147. Our lower answer choice would be 8,000. If I go up 1,000 from there, that would be 9,000. The midpoint would be 8,500. If I'm going to plot my number, 8,147, that would be below the midpoint, which means it would round down. And let's round our last number, 10,996. I'll start with 10,000. 1,000 more than that would be 11,000. And the midpoint would be 10,500. To plot 10,996 on the number line means it would fall below the 11,000 mark, but above the 10,500 mark. So we'll put that on. Since this number is past the midpoint, then my number would round up to 11,000. So I know the 3 numbers now that are rounded to the nearest thousand, but I still need to find the sum of those. I need to find 6,000 plus 8,000 plus 11,000. Well, 6,000 plus 8,000 would be 14,000 plus 11,000. Well, 14,000 plus 10,000 would be 24,000, and one more thousand onto that would be 25,000. That means that if we round our numbers to the nearest thousand, the pilot flew about 25,000 kilometers.